Mary, don't you wait on me. Oh.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. I am Carolyn Shareko, the interim director here at the Jones Memorial Library, and I would like to welcome you all here today. On behalf of the library staff and the library board, welcome. There's been questions about our mask policy. The board has not exactly had time to talk about that yet, so we're in transition. I would recommend doing what you are comfortable with in terms of masking today, but the signs will change perhaps soon. Today, I'd like to introduce our speaker, teacher, scholar, author, canoeer, kayaker, a few of the many words that describe today's speaker. For 40 years, Bob Gillette was a public school educator in Connecticut. He has been nationally recognized for his high school program, OTO, Opportunities to Teach Ourselves. For his innovation in experiential education, he was awarded the Mary Gresham Chair, a $300,000 grant by the New England Program for Teacher Education and the Department of Commerce. Among the many recognitions for his teaching, he received the Harvard Teaching Prize. As a result of his accomplishments, he has spoken and consulted nationally on educational topics. Additionally, he has directed religious education programs and created curricula in Jewish education. He is a graduate of Wesleyan University, earning a BA and an MAT, and studied at the Hebrew Union College, the Reformed Jewish Rabbinical Seminary. His first book, Paddling Prince Edward Island, came out in 2006. Perhaps you can imagine what that book might be about. This was followed by The Virginia Plan, William B. Thalheimer and a Rescue from Nazi Germany, published in 2011. Secondly, Escape to Virginia, From Nazi Germany to Thalheimer's Farm, published in 2015. As you will hear today, he continues his passion for exploring the history of his surroundings as he tells the story of Nurse Mary Gilbert Holmes. Please welcome Bob Gillette.
Thanks, Carolyn. And thank you, Jones Library, for the opportunity to share a unique American 20th century story. And thank you all who support this lecture series. It's important. And I want to make a special shout out to Chuck Bradner. Chuck, some people don't know you, some do. Stand up, Chuck, please. Chuck, believe it or not, he may look human, but Chuck is a walking, warm, breathing, digital archive computer in that body. And anytime you have any need for any archival work or questions about what goes on around Lynchburg and Campbell County and so forth historically, that's always my go-to. And thanks also to Gail Mitkin. Where's Gail? There she is right there. Gail is the one, through her detective work, put me in touch with Mary. This is a sort of a reunion here because Bonnie Kiger, where's Bonnie? Okay. And Dr. Joanna Harris, where are you? Okay. This is like a public health reunion, and I think that's really, really exciting. During today's presentation, I will be raising some questions, some of which may be considered in our Q&A period. And so my first question is this: why did I want to meet Mary Gilbert Holmes? The title of today's talk is Nurse Mary Gilbert Holmes, Touched by History, Maker of History. This is the story of a person's life that was powered by hope, by faith, by resilience and courage. It is a story of a generation of African-American nurses who were pioneers and and barrier breakers. The spider web is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for how we live in macro and micro worlds. We are caught within the web of historical events and movements, and yet we spin our own strands, our own personal histories. This is Mary Vida Gilbert. She was born in 1937 into a farming family in Gladys, Virginia. Now, when we look at this photo of her, our first impressions informs us that, well, here is a very young, poor African-American girl. But if we study the image, we begin to see the joy of being barefooted and squishing mud between her toes. And we glimpse also the indomitable spirit that resides in this little body. She grew up in Jim Crow country, a time of segregation, a time of demarcation between black experience and white experience, a time of survival and social strategies, a time of finding her comfort zone in the black world. Question: can I truly understand what it was like to grow up black in Jim Crow era? Does the younger generation of African Americans understand their grandparents' world and experience? Rebecca Gilbert, Mary's family. Percy Gilbert. They lived on a 50-acre farm which Percy Gilbert purchased in 1931, which is still owned by the family. Mary's parents could do everything. They could build, they could farm, they could repair, they could cook, they could sew, they could create out of nothing. Percy Gilbert built a log cabin from the trees on his property. It had no running water, no indoor plumbing, no central heating except for the wood stove, and no electricity. No radio, no television, no newspapers. There was an outhouse, and water was carried by pail from a nearby spring. Mary slept under the quilt that her mother had sewn from scraps of flour sack material, and she was warmed by the bodies of her sisters snuggled together in a shared bed. Mary's mother sewed all of the family's clothing, from skirts to shirts and even underwear. She played with a Raggedy Ann doll that looked something like this one that her mother sewed. And here is the family cow named Betsy, and they had a mule named Molly. And Rebecca Gilbert, Mary's mother, was known to be a mule whisperer. From that cow, Betsy, Mary churned butter. Everything was ironed, from dresses to sheets to underwear, probably socks. The cowbell called everyone in from working in the fields for mealtime. And Mary watched the neighbors come together for hog slaughtering. This was a communal event. The Gilbert children worked in the fields before and after after school. And tobacco farming is really hard, tough work. And its work calendar is endless. But it was a cash crop. Mary helped her mother can all sorts of fruits and vegetables picked from their garden that nourished the family through winter. What might seem to us as a poor, struggling life never occurred to Mary and her siblings. As she told me, I was happy. I had a roof over my head, warm clothes, a warm bed, wonderful food, and above all, loving parents and siblings. Percy used his truck to deliver produce to regular customers in Lynchburg, and on Sundays, Mary piled into the pickup truck with her brothers and sisters to travel the bumpy dirt roads to Buffalo Baptist Church in Halifax County, and spend a good part of the day, all day, at church. And church behavior was disciplined and deemed sacred by her parents. Mary walked barefoot for several miles to the Gladys Elementary School. She walked to school. A caravan of students, friends met up with her, and the laughter and chatter continued all the way to the school door. There she learned from teachers who cared for their students and visited their homes. Mary could never understand how the teachers could communicate with the parents without telephones. The parents knew about the school day, especially if one of the children was naughty, before the children even arrived home. Indeed, in those days, it took a community to raise children. She can still remember how the pot-bellied stove in the school all too slowly warmed the classroom, and she caught herself looking out of the large windows that let in so much light. Mary did not know it then, but her school was a Rosenwald school. Here she was touched by a prominent strand in the historical web. In the early decades of the 20th century, educational facilities and trained teachers were radically absent for black students. Their schools were in poor condition, as were the schools of poor white students as well. The conditions were terrible. Booker T. Washington, a famous African-American educator and founder of Tuskegee Institute, convinced Julius Rosenwald, president of Sears, Roebuck and Company, to engage in a massive school building program to educate black students. When asked why Rosenwald felt so strongly about funding projects for African Americans, he replied, "The horrors that are due to race prejudice come home to the Jew more forcefully than to others of the white race, on account of the centuries of persecution which they have suffered and still suffer." And so by 1928, Rosenwald built his Schools of Hope, and there were 26 Rosenwald schools in Campbell County alone. Rosenwald had a partnership in the building of those schools. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 of the money to build the school was raised by the local African American community. 1/3 was donated by the Rosenwald Fund, and 1/3 was donated or contributed by the local Board of Education. His concept was everyone should have ownership in the project and responsibility. Here we see the Negro organization was a substantive supplier of funds. You can see here the Negro Organization Society was in insistence, and by the way, like you, I have about 3 different pairs of glasses. Close, far, and in between. So I got to get a little closer here to read this. The Negro Organization Society was in assistance in cases of patrons in helping raise 1/3 for which they were responsible. All gifts from the Rosenwald Fund were conditioned upon additional gifts to match the benefactors. This buy-in concept is crucial. The scope of the Rosenwald schools was huge. By 1932, there were 5,357 Rosenwald schools throughout the South. They educated a major majority of black students living during that time. And right here in Lynchburg, on Spinoza Drive, just down the road from where our Mary lives on Spinoza Drive, is Megginson. If you want to get over there, you can see the concept of the construction. Rosenwald schools were known for large windows, on one side of the building because that building was so situated to catch as much light as possible. They did not have electricity. And here's the old school bell. Mary became an avid reader, and she loved her teachers and her classmates, and she was excited to ring the school bell to gather the students at the end of recess. Now, by the show of hands, how many of you here remember the handheld school bell? It's sad that the young students at school now hear buzzers and electronic, ringing. There's nothing like that old school bell. Campbell County High School for African Americans was where Mary, after attending Gladys Elementary School, went. By comparison, it was a very modern kind of building. And she was a very joyful and enthusiastic student. Even though her nickname was Pee-wee, her little body exerted a significant presence at school. She was, indeed, a true wildcat. She was voted the best female athlete, the class valedictorian, and the graduation speaker. She made her mark. Students and teachers respected her. And so that little person earned her diploma. There's little Mary. Where was she headed? How would she reach her dream of becoming a nurse? And there she is in the yearbook. Now let's spiral back a little bit, and let's think about the forgotten plague. Tuberculosis had been a plague for centuries. In the early 19th century, it was spiraling out of control. The advancements of developing public health had to respond to the cries of society. Paul Laurence Dunbar, the famous African-American poet, died on February 9th, 1906, at the age of 33. His name was memorialized, as we well know, in school names. TB killed between 3 to 4 million between 1870 and 1910. The disparity between the races was huge. Men and women of color more than doubled the TB deaths compared to whites. Consumption attacked all of society, rich and poor, young and old, black and white. And so therefore, in 1915, there was a commission to study TB in Virginia. It was a governor's commissioned report. And in that report, the two races are so intimate that a communicable disease affecting the Negro must in a grave measure affect the white, since there is not a bed maintained by the state at present for a Negro consumptive except in the state asylum and penitentiary. This was before. This was a turn of the century. This was what was stimulating and motivating people of public health to do something about it. Public health agencies started to respond to the crises. Everywhere, signs, no spitting. And then there was Agnes Dillon Randolph. Agnes Dillon Randolph was a public health advocate. She followed the model of a public health pioneer, Lillian Wald, of the New York tenement house movement. Randolph did not focus on immigrants, but rather on the needs of black citizens. She had political clout. She was the great-granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson. Lobbyist she was, extraordinaire. When she walked the halls of the legislature, people listened. She was a political power with laser-beamed targets of concern. Agnes Dillon Randolph wove a strand that would touch Mary's life web. She was a major contributor and a major catalyst for the report. and you can see her name there on one of the pages. How exciting it is to go to, let's say, the Library of Virginia and to fondle in your hand this report, for an example, from 1916. There was a need for a black sanatorium. Through newspapers and governmental notifications, cities and towns were asked to locate a TB sanatorium for African Americans. One of the cities that was asked to have a sanatorium established was Lynchburg, but the Lynchburg community responded vehemently, according to the notes of the commission. Any idea of such purchase was immediately dropped by that commission. Piedmont Hospital for Black TB patients was established in 1917, and the state legislature approved the building of a sanatorium for African Americans in Burkeville, Virginia. When I talk about Burkeville, most people sort of raise the question, where's Burkeville? And if I said it's near Farmville, then they sometimes raise the same question. It was named Piedmont. It opened its doors in 1918. It was the first TB hospital for African Americans in the country. It created a revolutionary approach to recuperation and education that supported the entire whole person. Cured patients became TB teachers in the community, in the black community, and often worked at Piedmont. These are, of course, early photographs. And Piedmont Hospital School of Nursing was the first TB school of nursing for African Americans in the country. A 2-year certification program was developed. In Mary's senior year in high school, she wanted to enroll in a nursing school to fulfill her dream. There were few nursing schools for black students. Money for tuition was a family problem. School counselors, who saw tremendous potential in Mary, settled upon Piedmont Hospital as a possibility. They did so with Mary because the hospital paid a stipend to the student nurses. In return, Mary could pay for her schooling. Piedmont Hospital and Nursing School is a modern facility. And this is what Mary saw when she went in the early mid-1950s. Mary strolled across the campus and stumbled upon this bronze plaque. And she asked questions about Randolph. Indeed, she would learn how another great American touched her life and changed it. First, it was Rosenwald, and now it was Randolph. When Mary went to the store to purchase white nursing shoes, the sales clerk asked, "Where are you to be a maid?" Mary responded, "I am not a maid. I am a nurse." And the clerk looked on with some astonishment. The life of a student was disciplined and demanding, with a schedule of classes and experiential learning on the wards. Student nurses were tested often for TB. Confronting TB up close, I can imagine, was difficult and tough. Mary experienced some fear. Not the fear of TB, not the fear of TB patients, but from her hope that she would do no harm. The student nurses were taught by white doctors, and some teaching staff was very supportive yet demanding. The teachers were concerned with the whole student, social, and academic. Mary was intrigued by a very special instructor, a doctor named Ilse Lehrman, a refugee from Nazi Germany in the 1930s. Why was she mysterious? How did she get to Piedmont? As part of her training in Virginia, there were only, of course, 2 facilities where African Americans could receive TB care. It was prison and the psychiatric hospitals before Piedmont was established. Mary received her psychiatric training at the only psychiatric hospital for African Americans, Central Virginia Hospital. When she was back at Piedmont, she was always saddened by the condition of some of the patients who finally made their way to Piedmont. What was the care like before? At Piedmont, Mary, of course, received her graduation diploma. She was joined by her very joyous graduates. There she is, holding her flowers. Her parents were so proud. Her siblings were also. Mary was the very first to ever go to college. Mary now was a nurse. She loved the coveted cape. Piedmont Sanatorium School of Nursing. A special striped cap. A cap that would be starched and clean. Where was little Mary going next? She knew and giggled from reciting a nurse's poem. We rub you and scrub you, take you out and tub you, treat you as a mother does her child. Need you, feed you, back to health we lead you, train you, restrain you, until you're nearly wild. We mold you, hold you, sometimes wish to scold you. But know that bad behavior is included in the game. We chide you, guide you, sit all night beside you, to ease you and please you, for we love you just the same. I love that poem, and so did Mary. Mary received the tools of the trade. But that wasn't the end of Mary's journey to become a nurse. St. Philip's Hospital of Nursing. Back in the 50s and early 60s. And let's read the plaque where St. Philip's Hospital Nursing School for African American students existed. Let me go right over here. During the era of racial segregation, the Medical College of Virginia established the St. Philip's School of Nursing for African American women. It operated from 1920 until September 1962, when the last of its 688 graduates received their nursing diplomas. 5 years earlier, in 1957, the MCV School of Nursing, and I think we have some graduates of that place. Where's Gail? Okay. In 1957, the MCV School of Nursing admitted the first African American student. And why did Mary go to St. Philip's? Because she had to study another year and a half to take the courses that would qualify her for the exam of registered nurse. This is Imogene Bunn. Again, Mary was touched by the web of history. This time it was Imogene Bunn. She was a St. Philip's graduate and also a recipient of a public health scholarship to earn her her Bachelor of Science from University of Michigan. She was the first black nurse hired by Richmond, Virginia City Schools. Imogene Bunn was the first African-American director of nursing for the Charlottesville Department of Health. Mrs. Bunn had a substantive relationship with St. Philip's. She lectured on public health. She had a direct pipeline with the staff to identify nursing students who potentially would be interested in public health and hospital nursing. She also was on the lookout for the right nursing student to be a pioneer at University of Virginia Hospital. Mary Gilbert came to her attention. It was Mrs. Bunn who brought Mary to Charlottesville. What was she looking for? She was looking for a nursing Jackie Robinson. Intelligent, talented, spirited, and enormously self-controlled. Why was the time right for integrating the professional nursing staff at UVA? And how did Imogene Bunn make headway? Imogene Bunn was married to the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Charlottesville. He established the first NAACP chapter in Charlottesville. He was a civil rights advocate and community organizer. The two made a very potent and effective team. Through their courageous efforts, Reverend Bunn integrated the public library, and Imogene Bunn integrated patient care at UVA Hospital. Reverend Bunn was an outstanding intellectual. His sermons were not the fire and brimstone so often found in Baptist churches, black or white. He challenged the congregants with ideas and often infused his sermons with civil rights concerns. Both Imogene and Benjamin were soft-spoken and very articulate. They were both light-skinned. They made a most acceptable appearance to the white community. What was that all about? They took Mary and offered her a home, their home, the parsonage of the church. The Bunns became Mary's second family. They both loved to listen to Mary's story of living on a farm as a girl, and they included her in their lives, in church and in other kinds of activities. This is the Baptist church that still exists in Charlottesville. And Mary went to that church, and though she wanted to become part of the choir, she couldn't because it was not able, wasn't able to because her shift was 3 to 11. When Mary arrived, she arrived at a time of urban renewal and the Vinegar Hill redevelopment in Charlottesville. Some of you may know something about that. This was a critical time in the development and progress of civil rights. In 1960, there was a new hospital, UVA Hospital. Mary was employed. She was hired in August of 1961. Now, Imogene Bunn was a strategist. She knew of the nursing shortage in the early 1960s. She had a working relationship with the hospital's CEO. She was a recognized leader in healthcare in Charlottesville. She was soft-spoken, but had an active focus on civil rights. She calculated when to make a move. Mary was hired as the charge nurse on the urology floor. The charge nurse is sort of, to my understanding, is more like a head nurse in that department. That meant that she had white nurses working below her. and she never received resentment or awkward prejudice. She worked a 3 to 11 shift, as I said, the entire time she was there. The records at UVA are like a serpentine wall. There is a difficulty in researching the thinking and decision-making related to integrating the professional staff of the hospital. It seems like much of the discussion of integration of nursing was done on a low-key, hush-hush manner. Written memos are hard to come by, but I am still hunting the hospital and university archives. The welcome to Mary in the hospital's in-house newspaper came in an article 1 year after she had already been on staff. Why the delay? Mary had no difficulty integrating into the professional staff, and to Mary, patients came first before everything else. It was her sense of quality care for patients that earned her the respect and confidence of the staff and patients. She never saw another black nurse during her stay at UVA Hospital. In 1963, on weekends and prior to 1963, when she was not on duty, Mary drove home south on Route 29. During one of her visits, she went to Campbell County High School basketball game and was introduced to Arthur Holmes, a popular science teacher at the school, by her sister. And in 1963, Mary moved to Lynchburg to marry Arthur. Upon her arrival in Lynchburg, Mary applied for a nursing position at Lynchburg Baptist Hospital. The response was, "No, we don't hire colored nurses." How would I have felt if I were Mary? Instead, she went to Lynchburg General, floor 2A, for colored patients. Nursing in Lynchburg compared to Charlottesville was a big step backwards. Lynchburg was known as a very conservative city, and it resisted integration in the health and education sectors. All you have to do is to read in between the lines of the annual reports of the City Council during these years. Integration would proceed slowly. Lynchburg General became legally a private hospital in order to escape the growing mandates from the federal government and the pressure from civil rights organizations. Movement towards integration was bubbling under the surface. One needs to read between the lines. Mary read the handwriting on the wall. Change was coming, but she felt stifled as a staff nurse at a non-integrated hospital. She yearned to be more involved with patients and families. The Lynchburg Public Health Department hired Mary as its first public health nurse in January 1965. Immediately, she felt at home. There was Joanna, there was Bonnie to welcome her. The other nurses welcomed her, and she was exhilarated by the freedom of movement going out into the field. The relics of discrimination still existed, but they were lessening. She remembers Dr. Hundley praised her in a sort of backhanded way. He said, "Mary is my best Negra nurse." And Mary responded politely but forcefully, "Doctor, I am your best nurse." I'll go on, I won't read this. Life behind or beyond public health involved, of course, sharing a life and a home with her husband, Arthur, He was a very popular but demanding teacher. He earned 2 master's degrees and a doctorate. He experienced the process of integrations of the Campbell County School District. He was a minister at that time of music at Pleasant Valley Church. And then he became Reverend Arthur Holmes. Later in life, Arthur became a pastor and a minister. Then, as now, most ministers of black churches have 2 full-time jobs. And so did Arthur. And it was a raising of a family and working so hard at their professions. It occupied every single minute of the day and night. At Public Health, Mary was the go-to person for TB and sickle cell anemia matters. She started the very first local sickle cell chapter in Lynchburg and became a statewide authority. She was often sent to conferences, and she returned to share the current health information with her fellow nurses. It was sickle cell anemia and was also TB, because she came from such a background with knowledge about TB. Hold on. Those white hats, I love them. These are symbols of the Ministers' Wives Association. As some of you know, being a minister's wife means that you become a significant part of the team. There are church activities, responsibilities, and often seeming unwarranted congregational expectations. Mary held this and walked with it with grace. And so not only was she a nurse in public health, she was also a mother, and she was also a minister's wife. Indeed, Mary never looked back and never looked for acknowledgement and praise for her work. It came to her naturally, and she was recognized. She received the Gold Star Award from the Ministers' Wives, and she traveled all over the country at various conferences. She was awarded by the University of Virginia. Their health system presented to Mary Holmes just a few years ago. And Marcia, my wife, and I were so pleased to be able to be there with her to receive this award, which really was in recognition of her being a pioneer in breaking the glass ceiling of nursing. And just last year, she received the Inclusive Communities Humanitarian Award, a coveted award earned by very special people. Mary Gilbert Holmes is a thread in the web that connects us to history and community. She has been touched and supported, but she has woven her own web within the web. The pillars of her life, her family, her faith, her mission. And I didn't have to coax her much to get into that old, starched, clean uniform. I think after I left her house, I do not doubt that she must have pranced around the house with it on. Parker Palmer writes, I invite you to stand here at the fence and look out on the garden to see what it has to teach us. For Mary, the garden of her youth flourished deep within her being. All her life, she went to the garden fence and asked, what can I do to help the world emerge from a long, cold winter, to contribute my little part to the emergence of new life and help leave behind a harvest that will nourish others. Mary answered her own question. Mary Vida Gilbert Holmes did just that. She became a nurse. Her life witnessed major American social changes, and indeed she was part of that change. She always considered herself most fortunate. With courage, faith, hope, and resilience, she achieved her dream to be a nurse. She broke glass ceilings. In her own joyful words, a nurse is a nurse, always a nurse. All I ever wanted was to be a nurse. And I'm so happy today, which is a little bit different when we talk about historical personalities, to welcome Mary Gilbert Holmes here. We're going to do a little vaudeville here. I wanted Mary to be here, to know how much I respect her and love her. Over the last maybe 4 years, we have been meeting almost every week. My prying, raising questions. And the more I did that, the more she revealed and has become a dear, dear friend. I want to use this question and answer period to address any questions that you might have, either raised in the presentation or directed to Mary herself, who is not shy. So I will entertain any question whatsoever. Yes, Gail, do you have one? You're just going like this, huh? You're flying. Okay. I have a question for you, Mary, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Did the presentation capture your life?
Yes, but a little over. Exaggeration. I really want to thank Bob for the tremendous work he's done. I feel a little violated because he seemed to know more about me than I know about myself. But it's been a joy working with him and telling my story. I'm grateful for the opportunity I've had to fulfill my dream. Excuse me. It was hard, but it was worthwhile, and I enjoyed every moment of it. And I appreciate those that I work with for being here today. I thank you so much.
Question.
Yes, I have a question, Miss Mary. Out of all, are you the oldest of your siblings?
No,
Okay.
I'm about middle way.
Middle way.
I'm one of 12.
How were, and I'm talking about the interaction in the family. How were they affected by you being the first going off to college and accomplishing accomplishing what you accomplished or doing what you were doing?
They were very proud and very supportive. It was sacrifice for them as well as for my parents. But everybody, we just work together. We've always done that as a family. Especially, you know, working in the tobacco field. And as I told Jim, you know, I entertained part of my family this weekend because it was my brother's birthday. And I was concerned about how much food that I would have. But I remember at home with all of us there, if you didn't cook a bushel of string beans for 9 children and a mom and dad, you were lost. And if anyone stubbed the toe coming to the table, you know, everything probably would have been gone by the time they got to the table. But it was fun. It was hard work, and we struggled. But and I think we were very poor but rich. You know, I was never hungry.
How were you rich?
We were rich in faith, we were rich in love, and we ate everything that we could, you know. I've eaten squirrels and rabbits. Have you ever eaten squirrels and rabbits? And, deer. We raised our own vegetables, and I think we raised everything except salt and pepper. So it was great fun. It was great fun. It was, as I said before, it was hard work. And that 4-room log cabin was a castle to us because we owned it. It was ours. You know, the girls had 1 room, and the boys had another. And now my kid says, "Mommy, he touched me." But if we didn't touch each other, that's the way we keep him warm. You know, we all snuggled up together. So it was really hard work. But and as I told Jim, Bob, I've always wanted to be a nurse. At home, I nursed everything before we ate it, you know. and my brother preached the sermon. You know, we killed our favorite pig before we killed our favorite pig. You know, I would try. I said, "Oh no, don't kill him, don't kill him." But then, well, we have to have it. You know, we have to have the bacon. We have to have this and have that. So. My brother Percy preached the funeral, and then we killed the hog. So at that time, we're living on a farm. It was essential to have a large family, because if you didn't, you'd have to hire other people to help you work the tobacco. So we with all 9 of us there. My dad was married twice. He had 3 children by his first wife. And then he had 9 by my mom. So with all of that, you know, we had a baseball team, and you know, we just had fun.
I know some of you who have perhaps grandchildren. Where could they purchase those bloomers that were sort of hanging out when you were a little kid standing in the mud there?
Mother made them.
Question over here.
Yes, I had the great pleasure of teaching with Reverend Holmes the first year that the Campbell County schools were integrated. And I knew him as as Bob says, a very strict teacher. He would not permit the use of nicknames in his classroom. And a very precise man. And I'm just wondering how you all met, and was he easier to live with at home than he was?
I don't know if I want to answer that. But my sister Rosa, would you stand up?
Oh, there's Rose.
That's my sister Rosa. Was her teacher, and she introduced him to me. And so she credits herself.
And I told her if I didn't get a good grade, I wouldn't let her see him.
Question back there, yes.
Mary, talk about a profile of courage. I mean, not very often that we have the honor to have somebody, as I said, who's a profile of courage actually with us. But what do you attribute your inspiration to become a nurse to?
Well, my grandmother was a midwife, and that inspired me in one way. And then I don't know where I got the idea of helping from. Maybe it was my great aunt. I said my grandmother, my great aunt was a midwife, but I just enjoyed the idea of helping people, and I thought it was an impossible thing to do, you know, to be a nurse, you know, because of our financial situation and the fact that I had never been away from home, and I just wanted to be a nurse, and it's very seldom that people have special dreams and that dream come true. So I'm really overjoyed with the fact that my dream came true. Yeah, I worked hard to get it. Those days at Piedmont were hard. And then leaving there and going to St. Philip, and I'd never been away from home. And I was scared to death, you know. But the courage that my mom and dad taught us to fight and struggle for what you want, and don't stop until you achieve it. I think that helped me.
And the true reason is she loved the nurse's cap. She loved the uniform. She always wanted to wear one of those. Question?
I have a question about your the years that you spent at Piedmont. Did your whole class manage to get through that time without getting TB? Anybody in the class?
Everyone made it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Three of the classmates left early because they really was afraid of tuberculosis, so they left. Mm-hmm. But the rest of us stayed, and to date, I don't even have a positive skin test. Wow. You just learn to respect the germs. And
yeah.
And how reminiscent it is, and how appropriate it is as we are coming out of our own pandemic, our own lost, as I called it, the last couple of years, that we can look back upon those tough times when there were epidemics and pandemics, and responding to it was so very, very difficult. Well, Mary, girl, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
It's my pleasure to be able to share this story, and again, the courage and the resilience that just flows from your life. So thank you very much, and everybody here, thank you so much for coming.
Quite an honor to have such a guest today. And thank you, Bob, for introducing her to us. Thank you also very much for coming today. It's a really great crowd in these times. I'd like to let you know about our next lecture series. It will be on May 18th, and it will be presented by Dr. Jim Wright, who is here with us today. The title is called The Black Hospital That Wasn't. It's a story behind the 1930s effort to build a hospital for African Americans in Lynchburg. So I'm sure it's going to be a lot of interest to all of us. Hope you will come back and join us. Anything else I need to say? Oh, good. Good.
Refreshments, please.
Yes, please. I did remember one other thing. We do have a sign-in sheet for guests, so we can have an opportunity to get back in touch with you again. It's on the table at the front of the room here, so if you didn't sign in when you came in, it would be great if you would, but mostly enjoy the refreshments. Thank you all for coming.
Might not want you when I go free. Oh,